Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel, Kelly Teaches Stuff. And this week we are continuing with our Encyclopedia project. And today's lesson entries are H, I, J, and K. And before we get started, students, we're going to go back a little bit and we're going to talk about the expectations for this project so we can all be on the same page. And those of you who might not be doing your best, let's talk about ways that you can. And so let's look at the expectations again. So it is the expectation that you do your very best and put forth as much effort as you can into your book. All right, let's go back and look at that line again. Put forth as much effort and your best effort as you can into your book. Don't rush through your assignments because you want more screen time or you want to watch your favorite shows. With that said, again, it's understandable that some of you students are taking on additional responsibilities at home, and you might not have as much time as other students to put into this assignment. But we do ask your teachers, Ms. Pedersen, Ms. French, Ms. Anderson, and me, Mrs. Simonson, that you do the best that you can do. All right. So when we had our team meeting the other day, a couple of us realized that some of you were only writing a sentence or two. And then later on, someplace in your entries, you were talking about being bored. Well, if you're only writing a sentence or two, then I'm pretty sure maybe you're not putting forth your best effort. So we talk about expectations. We're talking about an entry for a book. Then it should be at least a paragraph and maybe even more depending on, where you are telling your story. So a couple things. So remember, these are supposed to be real stories or anecdotes. Anecdotes is a little story that happened in your life. So you're supposed to be telling things that are true. You're supposed to be narrating your story. So you're not copying and pasting off of the internet and putting in that data or statistics for like your COVID-19 entry, right? That entry was supposed to be your thoughts and feelings of what's going on right now with you in your life so you could get those expressions out. So make sure that you're going back and you're reading our comments in Google Classroom as we respond to each of your entries, because we are doing that, and then go back and make fixes. And remember, you never turn in your documents into Google Classroom until you have made sure that you've edited, right? You don't want to see any blue lines underneath or any red lines. Those are things, when you see those, that need your attention before you send your entry in. The other thing that you have to do, boys and girls, is you have to read your entry out loud. So remember, when you are typing, your brain is working faster than your hands can type. So you will frequently, as you're typing, miss a word because in your brain, you've thought you've already typed that word. It happens to the best writers. That's just the way your brain is. Your brain works very fast. So when you're all done with your entry, you need to go back and you need to read it out loud and see, does my sentence make sense? Where do I have enough punctuation? Like, did I have a complete run-on sentence? So if you have a whole paragraph and you only have one period, then chances are you have a big run-on sentence. So what you need to do is go back and read. And wherever you feel like you want to stop or pause as you're reading, that's probably where you're going to want to put a period and then start with a capital letter on your next sentence. So hopefully, as you're turning in your entries this week, we will see less and less of those underlined areas, and you'll be making sure that every single I, when you're talking about yourself, right, because this is a book about you, is capitalized. I know as a team, we're still seeing a lot of students that are using the lowercase I. And remember, this is a book, right? You're not texting your friends. This is a book, and this is something that should be edited along the way. All right, so if you're unclear about your expectations, email or, pop in on your teacher's Google Meets. But in general, right, at least an entire paragraph for each entry. And again, we do have, certain entry requirements. And make sure that you're watching the entire video and not stopping all the way and not stopping in between before it's finished, because you don't want to miss something out for one of the letters that maybe we're looking for in your work. All right, so moving on from the expectations, let's talk about what we're working on today. So first we're going to tackle the letter H. All right, so if we look at our H column, some possible entries for H are we have haiku poems or habits, helping out, history, homeless or homelessness, honesty, hope, haunted house or hauntings, hard times or hiding stuff. So I have to laugh at the last one because when I was thinking about hiding stuff and I was talking to Mrs. Pedersen, a secret that you might not know about her is that she hides chocolate all over her house to keep it away from her children so they don't get it. Miss Pedersen is an extreme chocoholic, and so her daughter, I know, is probably watching this right now, or will be watching it soon when it's uploaded. And kids, I think you should just go try to find your hiding spots because they're actually really pretty good. So if I was Mrs. Pedersen and this is my book, my entry would be about hiding stuff, and I would talk about like my hiding places and all the different kinds of chocolate that I have to hide from my children. But to help you guys out today, since maybe you're not hiding things, I will admit I do hide some chocolate sometimes from my husband if I think that he might get to it before I do. But we're going to talk today about haiku poems because you know that you have to have at least one poem, if not more, in your poetry book. Now, with that being said, remember that you're not going to go to the internet and find a haiku poem that somebody else wrote and put it in for yours, right? This has to be one that you have written on your own. So you have to write a haiku poem if you want that as your entry. And I'm going to share a couple with you today, and then let's talk about that for just a little bit. So just a little background information on haiku poems. First of all, they're a traditional Japanese poem. They're usually 3 lines. The first line has 5 syllables. The second line of the poem has 7 syllables. Let's see if you can see that. And the third line has 5 syllables again. All right. They hardly ever rhyme, boys and girls. So the one thing, if you think, oh, I have to write a poem that rhymes, remember, not all poems rhyme. Most of the haiku poetry is about nature, about flowers, about the seasons, the sun, the moon, anything in nature. They're rich with figurative language, all right? There are metaphors, there's similes, there's personification, and it's just a very rich language. So when you think about a poem and you're thinking about writing a poem and you only have 17 syllables, right? And you have a pattern, you have to be very thoughtful about the words that you're using. You don't have that many words to use, so you have to be creative and clever. You have to make sure that you are not repeating words, right? When you're only using so few words, you really have to think about, how can I make the most impact and what words can I use? So I'm going to share a couple with you. One I found online, and this is out in the public domain. This is called October's Gold, and it's by a writer called Paul Holmes. And let's look at this right here. He says it's called October's Gold. I want you to listen first and think about the poem, and then we'll talk about the syllable count. Like crunchy cornflakes, gold leaves rustle underfoot, beauty in decay. All right, I chose that one just because I love how he captured October. So let's think about this first. So let's go through our syllable count. Like crunchy cornflakes, that's 5. Gold leaves rustle underfoot, that's 7. Beauty in decay, that's 5. All right. So if we look at this poem right here, we see the light can't talk today, like crunchy cornflakes, gold leaves rustle underfoot. So he's comparing the gold leaves, the color of the leaves on the ground as you're stepping in the fall, right? They're making the sound like crunchy cornflakes. Well, that's our simile, right? We're comparing the gold leaves like the crunchy cornflakes. And then he says beauty in decay, all right? So we know fall is magical in all that its beauty. So the author, Paul Holmes, is saying even in the decay mode, right, of where all the ground has the leaves and the leaves are breaking down. There's still beauty there with the color of the bright colors and the sound that we have. So notice his rich use of words. Nothing is repeated, right? We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 words. So we have to be very thoughtful about the words that we're using. All right, so that's one example. There's another example, boys and girls, that I literally just minutes ago saw come across my Facebook page when I'm going to share another writer's work with you in just a minute. But this one just popped up on my page. So it's very serendipitous. Serendipitous is kind of like things that happen just in the universe that are very cool because they happen at the right time. And so this is a haiku poem that literally just came across my Facebook page. And I don't know if you can see this. Okay, well, I'll just read it to you. All right, so listen carefully. We isolate now. So when we gather again, no one is missing. All right, very, very powerful. We isolate now. We isolate now. That's 5. So when we gather again, 7. No one is missing. No one is missing. Very, very powerful haiku. There was not an author associated with that, so I don't have an author to share with you for that, but that I really, really liked that haiku. So remember, if you choose to write a haiku, okay, I'd like you to try more than one. Don't just do one haiku for this entry. Try a couple, 2 or 3. If you're not sure about how many syllables are in a word, just look it up, right? You're on a laptop, you're on a device. You can see how the word is divided to help you with syllables. And sometimes it takes a little while to get what you want to say, and that's okay. Haikus are actually kind of one of the more difficult poems to write just because it does require to be very thoughtful and you have to have your syllable count correct. So remember, when you're typing these, right, your poem needs to have 3 lines, just 3 lines. Each line should start with a capital letter. You can have a period at the end. And then check your syllable count, right? 575. So I was working on some earlier today because I wanted to have another example since the ones that I shared with you weren't really in nature. October's gold is a season, and we know haikus can be about seasons as well. But one of my favorite flowers is a daisy. And I just think they're like the happiest flower. So I'd been working on a couple of different ways to write this poem about daisies. And I actually have 3 different takes on here because it took me a little while to get my words correctly. So first I started off with a daisy, beautiful flower, soft white petals, and then I kind of got stuck. All right, so then I backed up and I thought about what a daisy looked like. I actually brought up an image on my laptop so I could concentrate and think about, what I really wanted to say. So my second attempt was circles of petals, that's 5, surrounded by golden, nope, surrounds the golden center, that was 7. And then I wanted to say something like sunshine in my garden, but I couldn't get the syllable count right, like sunshine in my garden. That would be 7. It has to be 5. So I had to rework that, and it's okay. Sometimes you have to go back and play with your words. So finally, on my 3rd attempt, and remember, I'm a writer, and it took me 3 attempts, so it might take you that long too. That's okay. So my title is Daisy, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and type this for you here so you can see actually how the final product will look here. Okay, so I titled it Daisy. So if you decided to do this, this would be under haiku. So under the letter H, then you would say, you would type haiku poem, your title. Actually, sorry guys, that's supposed to be all caps, H-A-I-K-U, poem. Okay, and then underneath that, you would write your poem. Okay, so I'm going to do my title. And I'm just going to do my title in all caps. Okay. So then after I worked with my words, this is what I came up with. Okay. White petals surround. White petals surround. That's 5. Okay. That's my first line. Remember, I have to have 3 lines. A golden dotted center. A golden dotted center. That's 7. Okay. Sunshine. Whoops, I have to go to my next line. Sunshine in a vase. Okay. Sunshine in a vase. There we go. And that's my Daisy poem. Okay, that's an original. White petals surround a golden dotted center, sunshine in a vase. So let's think about this. Did I get some figurative language in there? Okay, so we're talking about the white petals surrounding the golden dotted center, and I'm saying it's sunshine in a vase. So I've just called a daisy, right? Sunshine in a vase. So if I'm calling one thing something else, it's a metaphor. So the poem is actually a metaphor for a daisy, right? The white petals surrounding a golden dotted center, sunshine in a vase. And there you go. That's a haiku poem. So if I wanted this for my H entry, I would try at least 1 or 2 more. Okay. Now remember, your haiku poems should be about nature, but you know what? If you wanted to write about your pets, if you wanted to write about your family, that's certainly fine. And remember, haiku poems usually don't rhyme at all, so you don't have to worry about that. If you wanted to try a rhyming one, that would certainly be fine. But just remember, you shouldn't have 2 of the same words describing it, right? So make sure that as you're writing and you look at it, that you didn't use the word amazing twice, right? Or if you look at my poem, I didn't use the word white twice or surround twice, right? You only have a few words to use, so pick them carefully. All right, so that's for the letter H. All right, let's go back and let's move forward and let's go to the letter I. All right, so if we're talking about the letter I, an option or some things that you could do. I really wish I hadn't. Maybe something you wish that you hadn't done that you did do, and it maybe didn't turn out great. So that would be a narrative story. You'd have to tell the whole thing. You could talk about Instagram. You could talk about the next one, in a quarantine, right? We're in quarantine right now. What's going on in your life? And remember, when you're writing your story, boys and girls, use details, right? Don't just say, oh, it's bad, or oh, it's good, it's fun, right? Say what's going on. Get those words out. Illustrations. If you did not do an art entry for the letter A or D for drawing or doodling, you could put your artwork here under illustrations. All right, the next one, imagine. So you could add on to that, right? Imagine if, and then you could just come up with something. So my sci-fi writers out there, you could say, imagine if aliens came down to the earth, or imagine if we're really, I don't know. You'd have to try that one. I'm stuck on that one. All right, if only. So if only, what if only something else? If only I had been the firstborn, how would that be different for me? If only I lived in Germany, right, instead of here. So think about that, if only something was different in your life. If I was in charge of the world, we're actually going to come back to that in just a minute. That's a poem written by Judith Forrest, and that's a really cool one that you could do for the letter I. And the last one could be an interview. All right, you might want to interview a grandparent or a friend or an aunt, an uncle, and ask them some questions about things in their life. So if I could go back and interview somebody right now, I might talk to my dad a little bit more about maybe how when he first met my mom, and ask him questions about that. Like, what was the first thing that drew your attention to my mom? Or, how was your first date together? So you could interview a parent or a grandparent or great grandparent and ask them several questions, not just 1 or 2, but several questions about their life. And then you would type that up. Your question would be a line, and then their answer would be a line. All right, let's go to If I Was in Charge of the World. Okay, so this is a poem by Judith Vorst, and I usually have my students write a poem like this each year, and we didn't get to it. So this is one that you could do in your book, and let's talk about what this would look like. If I were in charge of the world, if I were in charge of the world, I'd cancel oatmeal, Monday mornings, allergy shots, and also Sarah Steinberg. If I were in charge of the world, there'd be brighter nightlights, healthier hamsters, and basketball baskets 48 inches lower. If I were in charge of the world, you wouldn't have lonely, you wouldn't have clean, you wouldn't have bedtimes, or don't punch your sister. You wouldn't even have sisters. If I were in charge of the world, a chocolate sundae with whipped cream and nuts would be a vegetable. All 007 movies would be G. And a person who sometimes forgot to brush and sometimes forgot to flush would still be allowed to be in charge of the world. And again, our authors write down here Judith Forrest. Okay, so let's talk about how you would write your poem. So the first thing I noticed is we have one, two, three, we have 4 stanzas. Okay, so you should have 4 stanzas in your poem. And let's look about how each one starts. Each stanza starts with, if I were in charge of the world. Okay, so in the first stanza right here, the author talks about things that would be canceled. So if I were in charge of the world, and then 4 things that would be canceled, right? Canceling oatmeal, Monday mornings, allergy shots, and Sarah Steinberg. So maybe Sarah Steinberg is a person that they don't like very much. Instead of naming somebody, their boys and girls, in your poem, either change that out or maybe think of a villain or something that you would like to cancel, or a villain in your story or in a book that you're reading that you wouldn't mind canceling. Or maybe there's an author that you don't like that you'd like to cancel their books. So if this were my poem, I would write, if I were in charge of the world, I'd cancel COVID-19 for sure. And if you want to steal that line from me, you can. What else would I cancel? I would cancel Google meetings where none of your children show up, right? Oh, have you guys been coming to your Google Meets? All right, so what else? Allergy shots, probably allergy medicine. And also, let's see, somebody I'd cancel. I'm thinking about some villains here. Maybe um, Lex Luthor on Superman, or somebody else that's like a bad guy. Okay, so the whole first stanza is things you cancel. All right, so easy enough. And you'd write it just like that, 4 lines. All right, let's look at the second stanza. Again, you'd start with the first line, if I was in charge of the world. Now, in the second stanza, boys and girls, the author's talking about things that they would change. All right, so in this stanza, if you decide to write on this, you're going to talk about things you're going to change. All right, so in this poem, there'd be brighter nightlights, healthier hamsters, and basketball baskets 48 inches lower. So we know the person that this is, who supposedly wrote this, is a person who's shorter, right? Who's challenged and isn't able to maybe make all the baskets. So if I'm thinking about things that I would want to change, right? Instead of brighter night lights, I would think maybe less street lights in my neighborhood so I could see the stars. Let's see, healthier hamsters, maybe dogs that have a longer lifespan than like 14 years or 17 years. And then let's see, in basketball baskets, that would be 48 inches lower. And maybe, so if I'm thinking of something to change there, I would think maybe cupboards in a kitchen that couldn't be near the ceiling so that I could reach them or not have to get a ladder. All right, so the whole second stanza is about things that you would want to have changed. Okay, so let's look at the third stanza. All right, in the third stanza, again, you're going to start off with, if I were in charge of the world. All right, then the next 3 lines are you wouldn't. You wouldn't have, you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have. And now you're going to think about the things that wouldn't be in the world at all. right? You wouldn't have homelessness, or you wouldn't have countries without food, or you wouldn't have, let me see, gigantic cars that take up more than one parking spot, right? This could be silly things too. All right, so the next three lines are things that you wouldn't have. All right, and then look at the or the next two lines kind of go together, right? Or don't punch your sister, you wouldn't even have sisters. So when you write that line, try to get those two lines together, right? Don't punch your sister, you wouldn't have sisters. So try to make sure that you get those two that kind of, the two lines kind of connect to each other. All right, in the last stanza, okay, if I were in charge of the world, all right, now they're saying things that could be like something else, right? A chocolate sundae would be this. So in that line, you could think about one thing that you would want to be something else, right? And then he talks about the movies that he wanted to be G. And then in the next couple lines, you're going to say, and a person who sometimes forgets something, right? And a person who sometimes, and for me, that would be sometimes I don't do the dishes before I go to bed, which I would really like to, but sometimes I'm tired. And so for my line there, it might be a person who sometimes forgets to do the dishes, right? And then sometimes forgets to, and then they say flush, then I could think of something else I forget to do. And then the last two lines you could keep the same, would still be allowed to be in charge of the world. So you could actually keep those two lines in there. So again, we are taking a poem that Judith Vorst wrote, and we're using it as a template to make our own. All right, and we'll make sure that you have a link to this so that you can come back and kind of use that as a pattern. All right, that's for letter I. All right, let's look up we have for letter J. For letter J, we have just wondering, justice, journaling, judging, jealous, joy, junk, jobless. All right, and as I was going through Facebook the other day, boys and girls, I found on one of the Wake Forest pages a photojournalist that was writing about his morning out taking photographs of wildlife along the Neuse River area. And I actually contacted him. He's not on my friends list. I don't know him, but I contacted him and commented and said that I thought that his journal entry was so good. And I asked him if I could share it with my students, and he gave me permission. So as you can see, I'm actually going to read right from my phone his entry that he shared with, gosh, it's quite a few people were on this site at one time. So I'm going to actually read what he wrote. So if you're going to write for journaling, or you're going to add this, just take a moment, go outside. You could even stay in your room and look outside and write about what you see, right? Take in the sights, take in the sounds. When we talk about rich writing with rich vocabulary, I want you to listen to how he writes and how he's describing his morning. So this was in the morning of April 19th. And again, the author is Charles Tilley, and he's a Wake Forest person. So the cool air and fog on the river made this a great morning. Okay, the temperature this morning was 33 degrees when I left the house at for the Dam Falls Lake. With the limited parking, you must arrive early if you want a spot close to the dam, or be prepared to hike a little with all your equipment. After parking, the walk down to the dam was a little cool, and the heavy fog rising from the river was a little like walking into one of the Harry Potter movie scenes. Very moody, with the air filled with bird sounds. Okay, so do you see how he described, the scene that he was seeing to something familiar that you all might have seen? So after setting up the camera, I sat back and relaxed for a few minutes with a cup of hot coffee. It was cooler on the river as the fog drifted in, out, and around where I was sitting. I pulled my sweater a little closer as I tried to look through the fog down the river. It is strange how familiar sounds can sound so creepy when coming from the deep. in a fog bank, and all you can see are the dark silhouettes moving here and there in the fog. I love mornings like this. Great blue herons were flying and hunting all along the river, as was a single red shoulder hawk. Several osprey were seen behind the trees, but they were busy going someplace more important at the time. I didn't have to wait long before an osprey flew up the river and landed in a tree across from where I was sitting. After watching the river for a few minutes, the osprey flew out above the river, hovered for a few seconds, and started its dive towards the water. It was a classic dive, and I thought this time I may have captured the osprey when its talons just entered the water. But it was not to be. Each time I attempt this, the osprey's feet are a few inches before hitting the next frame it is in the water. It was also the same this time. With the cool weather and the fog on the river, it was, as usual, a great time to be out in the woods, right? And then he had some amazing pictures on there. Do you see how he captured like the whole mood of the morning, right? He talked about the fog rolling in. He compared it to a movie. He was talking about sounds that we normally take for granted being kind of creepy in this tone, with everything kind of shrouded in fog. That's good writing, boys and girls. So when you're writing, make sure that you have a lot of details, right? Details make the story. If you only would use words like great or awesome, right, you're not going to give that reader that sense of being there, that sense of, wow, that's really cool. So I appreciate him sharing that with us and saying that we could use his entry, his journaling entry. And so if you wanted to do that, go out with your laptop somewhere, sit on your front porch, sit in your backyard, sit looking out your window and watch, observe. And as you see the birds or the cardinals going around looking for food, or maybe you could spot birds in a nest, right? Write about that. That's very, very cool. All right, so let's move on. That's letter J. Let's move on to letter K. And so for the letter K, we have like keeping busy, kids, kites, karma, keepsake, kisses, kittens. I know Miss Ziller has her kittens. When we were on our Zoom meeting the other day, her little kitten kept coming right across the screen. It was so cute. So if you have kittens, you could write about those. If you have a special keepsake, I know some of you had some really pretty jewelry pieces that were given you, a pendant or a necklace from a mom or a grandmother. You could write about keeping busy. What are all the things you're doing to keep busy right now? But I'm going to share my entry because you might have a lot of kids in your family, brothers and sisters, and you might want to talk about them right now. And I actually talked about my brothers and sisters on my encyclopedia book. So we're going to go to that really quickly for the letter K. So you could also write about kids, and you could talk about the kids that are sharing your household right now, whether they're brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever. So K, kids. My mom had 6 kids. Yes, 6. Since I was number 6, I am not sure how the whole let's name all of our 6 kids with the letters K came into play, but there you have it. Here is our family table of names. Notice anything? All right, so I made a table here. So just take a moment to look at that and look at the table there and see what you notice about my family. Okay, so first, we all start with the letter K. Our last names were all K. But let's look at our middle names. All the boys were named what? Alan. All the girls were named what? Anne. All right. So did you see that all of our initials were KAK growing up? That means that on our bag lunches, we couldn't even just go by our initials since they were all the same. And none of us have unique middle names. To add insult to injury here, I found out that my mom was really going to name me Corinne instead of Kelly. It was my older sister, Karen, shame on you, sister, that convinced her that I should have the name Kelly. I am certain that my life would be very, very different if I had a cool name like Corinne. First of all, I would be taller. I would also be semi-famous, kind of like a household name. It would go like this. Oh, yeah, that Corinne. I know which one you're talking about. Isn't she the one that does those cruel phone commercials? Yeah, that would have been me if I'd had a cool name like Corinne. All right, and then I wrote kids too, like a second entry since I used kids already. So let's look at that one. I like kids. It's a good thing since I have taught a gazillion of them. That's hyperbole. It's also good that I come with patience since most days they try it like no tomorrow. You know who you are. All right, next is Kool-Aid. So I had a lot of things that I thought about for the letter K. Word to the wise, don't ever lick the inside of the packet that doesn't have the added sugar. Yuck. It says C also, yuck. And then Kelly, my first name, and also Miss Anderson's first name. Rhymes with smelly, jelly, and belly. Not so great when you have older siblings that were quick with wordplay. That age thing really hurts a person when they're the baby of the family and are trying to get a little name revenge, but they can't rhyme. Just another reason I should have been named Corinne. What rhymes with Corinne? Not much. All right. So there we go for your ideas for this week. Letter H, I, J, and K. Let's remember our expectations, right? We're going to write narratives, stories about your own life, what's going on right now, or memories that you've had in the past. You're going to make sure that you are writing yourself and not copying and pasting anything off of Google or not borrowing anybody's haiku poems if you choose to do that, right? Challenge yourself, write some haiku. It's pretty cool stuff. Let's see. Make sure that before you turn into Google Classroom, right, you've done all your editing, you've read your work out loud, right? Read it to a family member, read it to a pet, but you have to say the words out loud because that's where you'll see if you made a typo or a mistake. And then make sure that everything that is blue or red underlined, you have right clicked, looked at the suggestion, and fixed it before you turned it in. All right. And no lowercase i's when you're talking about yourself. All right, so let's make sure that you do all your work this week. Remember, when you do not do your work, something happens to our unicorn, and that poor little guy has met his demise almost every single week because some of you aren't doing your work like you need to be. So let's see how he's going to meet his demise today. And there he goes. Don't kill a unicorn. Boys and girls, do your work. So stay safe, wash your hands, get in touch with your teachers if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time. So Kelly Teaches Stuff is out.